So I'd just like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and we acknowledge their spiritual connection to country. For those I haven't met before, my name is Melia. I'm part of the community team here at Blackbird, and today I'm very fortunate to be joined by Jess Cook, Australian Head of Marketing for Square. So at Square, Jess is responsible for brand, performance and content marketing, social media, lead generation and marketing analytics. Just a couple things. And prior to joining Square, Jess worked in marketing leadership roles for an array of global and local fashion and retail brands, including Topshop, Country Road, The Kooples and Wrangler. Jess also led the Australian launch for Topshop and The Kooples, so she knows a little bit about bringing a brand to market. Today, Jess is going to explain why you should invest in marketing your new or existing brand, tips for setting your marketing team up for success, how to balance your marketing strategy and prioritize high value and high impact work, and measurement framework whilst balancing the short, medium and long-term value creation. So as usual, we're going to have about 10 minutes at the end of this talk for a Q&A. So send through any questions that you have using the Zoom Q&A function, and I'll be in the chat to remind you about where you can pop your questions through. Anyway, let's get started. Over to you, Jess.
Great, thanks Melia. Hi everyone, just give me a minute and I will share my screen.
Looks good.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for the intro, Amelia. I'm thrilled to be here and thanks for getting up so early to talk all things marketing strategy with me this morning. It's one of my favorite topics that I could talk for hours about, but we've got 20-ish minutes and we'll make every minute count. So I hope you've got a coffee or a tea. I've got mine, and with that, we will jump in. So let's start with a little about me and how I landed in front of you today. So my name is Jess. Hi. Over the past 16-ish years, I've had the privilege of working for a mix of global and local brands of all shapes and sizes, in teams of all shapes and sizes, and with budgets of all shapes and sizes. I specialize in helping brands drive awareness and accelerate growth, but what gets me out of bed every morning is thoughtful, design-led customer experiences and working with incredible teams to enable these. So as Melia mentioned, I spent most of my career working within fashion and retail brands, but 3.5 years ago, I transitioned to technology at Square. I got my dream job and opened my life up to the wonders of a more data-driven approach to marketing strategy. So today, I hope you walk away with some information on how to approach marketing strategy for either your startup, your new brand, or maybe you discover a new perspective on how you could position marketing and marketing strategy within your own business. So specifically, we'll cover the value marketing can add to your business. So why invest in marketing, how to get started, how to build your strategy, and then how to think about measurement. So firstly, why marketing? As you're thinking about setting up a marketing function for your business, or maybe you need to work with your existing stakeholders to educate them on the role of marketing, ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I choosing to hire a marketing person or even build a marketing department? You know you've got a finite number of resources, both in terms of your headcount and your capital, and you want to invest your time in making your product remarkable, because we all know founders are usually very product obsessed, as they very much should be. Well, marketing will drive long-term value creation for your brand. How? Well, it starts with great marketing strategy, but at a higher level, great marketing captures the hearts and minds of your audience, which will enable future sales and revenue opportunities. All right, next, let's debunk some of the myths around what marketing is, because in an ideal setting, everything is marketing. Kind of ironic coming from the marketing girl. But I'm going to take a minute to read out this quote from the Harvard Business Review. Now, bear with me, it's a mouthful, but it's worth it. Marketing today is not a function, it is a way of doing business. Marketing is not a new ad campaign or this month's promotion. Marketing has to be an all-pervasive part of everyone's job description, from the receptionists to the board of directors. Its job is neither to fool the customer nor to falsify the company's image. It is to integrate the customer into the design of the product and to design a systematic process for interaction that will create substance in the relationship. So it's a mouthful, but this quote really nails the notion that marketing is not a tap that you turn on to drive customer acquisition. It's not just an expense line item within your P&L. It's a long-term strategy that everyone buys into and contributes to. When you build virality into your business model, for example, some surprise and delight moments in your product or fulfillment experience, your marketing investments are going to be more efficient for you. An example of a brand that's done this really well is cult US cosmetics brand Glossier. They've done a brilliant job at integrating brand experiences into their product fulfillment. For example, your Glossier order will arrive in some bright pink bubble wrap packaging that is literally made for that Instagram arrival photo. Inside that packaging, in addition to your makeup purchase, which is a lot of fun in itself, is a series of designer stickers that are available as Instagram stickers that can be added to your Instagram stories. So whilst we all wish that we could run campaigns and that sales would immediately translate like a tap that you can just turn on, experienced marketers know that it's a marathon and not a sprint. So fun fact, that quote was actually first published in 1991. So I'd say it's aged quite well. All right. So scope, what does marketing strategy drive? Or another way of putting this is, what does your marketing team really do? Now, don't worry about reading the long list of tactics on this slide. The key thing to take away is that the scope of marketing can be really broad. To any marketers in the audience or people working within existing brands, this is definitely going to seem really obvious. The reason this is important when developing your marketing strategy is that you need to be mindful and realistic about how that strategy is going to be brought to life with the resources that you've got. But why? We want to do it all. It's something that you might hear from an enthusiastic founder or CEO. Well, I would say that if your goal is to deliver high impact, world-class marketing, I'd encourage you to think about prioritization of your tactics so that you can create some space to do some really powerful, innovative work. So the scope of your marketing team can often depend on the size of your company, the age of your brand, and the country that you're located in. Sometimes it might only be top funnel marketing, for example, awareness campaigns. Sometimes it might be mid funnel, for example, content marketing. There are lots of different ways of splitting up priorities and tactics across your teams. If you're getting something off the ground, you know that every person on the team is a set of hands to help with anything, whether it be setting up your marketing strategy or literally building IKEA desks for your first office space. We've all been there. So let's take a minute to highlight some of the common scope within new brands. It can include things like building your brand architecture, so your logo, your typefaces, and your motion standards, your brand positioning, so how you fit into the world. It can include building your own channels, for example, your website and social media, and establishing growth and retention marketing, for example, your in-app and email marketing. Sometimes you might also find that you are the PR manager at launch if you can't yet afford to hire a full-time resource or an agency to support in this area. Zooming in on the differences in marketing teams by country, in the US, for example, because of the scale of the market, full-time resources usually focus on one specific area, for example, paid social media and performance marketing, and they can go really, really deep into that one area. Whereas in Australia, generalist marketers are often more common relative to the size of our market. And when you're hiring a generalist, they can come from all sorts of different places, but most important is their curiosity and inner hustle to learn new things on the job. That's literally what the country manager of Square said to me when he hired me 3.5 years ago. So why is this important to understand? Well, in addition to feeding into your marketing strategy, when you're comparing the output of your marketing team to that of Apple or Google or Nike or any of the best in class brands, and I believe very passionately that you should always benchmark against the best, be mindful and realistic about the differences in the team size and the team scale. Okay, so how do you get started? Again, this is going to seem super obvious, but focus on hiring the right people. Your people are your greatest asset. To set your new marketing team up for success as you're hiring, be clear about your vision, your expectations, and the role you see marketing playing within your company. My most successful hires have been people with a desire to grow and learn, because when your people grow, your brand will grow. So are you going to be a product-led company that wants to keep marketing costs low and focus on product optimization? Or do you want marketing to influence the overall customer experience and guide your product positioning? My recommendation is to be transparent and realistic with your priorities and your resources. And in doing so, you'll attract the right people that are aligned to your mission and your scope, and you'll reduce churn. There's nothing worse than hiring an experienced or maybe an expensive team and underutilizing them because you can't fund or execute their ideas. Employee churn is a significant cost to any company, and it can be avoided or at least minimized. Okay, so B2B versus B2C. Before we get into the specifics of marketing strategy, you might be wondering, does this differentiate between B2C, which is business to consumer, and B2B, which is business to businesses? Controversially, in my opinion, no. Full disclosure, Square is a B2B brand that acts like a fusion B2B and B2C brand. Why? Well, our products and services are designed for businesses of all sizes, which can mean that someone who has a side hustle jewelry brand and sells at design markets on the weekend, or a hospitality group that owns 20 quick service poke bowl restaurants can use our products and services. And that customer profile of a micro business owner is often more aligned to your standard or typical consumer. So from my perspective, the fundamentals and theory are the same when it comes to developing your strategy, but the audience targeting, the messaging, the decision-making process, and the tactics can be different. For example, if we look at Nike, they're a consumer brand that has a large portion of their business sold via wholesale distribution outlets, which is B2B. For example, Hype DC, maybe you bought a pair of sneakers there recently. How do they differentiate marketing to those two different segments? Well, the overarching company mission and business goals are aligned. Their business strategy is aligned, but the specific tactics to reach each audience might be a little bit different. It could be mass awareness campaigns that reach both audiences, and targeted product information nights or wholesale training tools for their B2B customers. So with that in mind, I hope that this content is applicable to you regardless of the segment that you operate within. All right, so you ready to start thinking about marketing strategy? Where do you start? It all starts with your company mission. So what you see on screen here is what's on the wall in our Square offices around the world. This is our San Francisco office on Market Street, and it says economic empowerment. Our purpose is to empower people all over the world to participate in the economy with access to business tools. You might have seen our little white credit card at your local coffee shop or bar. We make accessible, easy tools for businesses of all sizes. From here, it's all about financial goals. Are you looking to launch a brand and grow to 5% market share within the next 3 years? Well, your marketing strategy will provide a high-level vision on how you do this. Okay, so you have your company mission and you're mapping your strategy to your financial goals. Next, we translate this to your marketing strategy. So here is an example of how Square has translated our mission to our marketing strategy. As you can see, our strategy is defined as we help businesses navigate any environment by providing solutions that work together, access to our open platform, and advocacy for economic empowerment. So how do we approach doing this? Well, by creating awareness and consideration, which results in revenue. And then what are the activities that we focus on? Well, the sky is the limit here, but you'll often find things like brand marketing, performance marketing, and what's defined as foundational activity, which is a very, very broad area and not something to be glossed over in terms of time and resources required to bring that to life. Okay, so speaking of bringing things to life, how do we bring that strategy to life with creative and media? So what you see on screen here is a billboard from a current Square campaign that I hope some of you might have seen on the streets of Sydney and Melbourne over the past few weeks. It's an example of how we brought our strategy to life with creative and media. But back to you. So how do you bring your strategy to life? So by this point, I'm going to assume that you have your company mission, you've got your marketing strategy, you've got your brand positioning, and your logo work. It's all done. These are all very important and very meaty projects in themselves. So how do you figure out what creative assets that you might need to tell your story? Firstly, budget. You won't be shooting campaigns with any famous photographers as a startup unless you have deep pockets from some serious investors. So figure out what message you want to tell and how best to bring it to life. To help you make this decision, think about your distribution plan, which also comes down to that budget. Those dollars are going to need to cover your creative production and your media, and there's no point in producing something beautiful that no one's going to see. There are different recommended splits between creative to media depending on the industry and brand life cycle that you're in. I'd recommend keeping it close to no more than kind of 15% of your media spend. That's your total creative cost. If you work with a creative agency that has expensive taste in photographers, they might tell you something a little bit different. If you don't have a media budget and you're only creating assets for use on your own channels, such as your website or your social media channels, consider how important these assets are to differentiate your brand and communicate your value proposition. Are you a design-led company? If you are, don't cut corners on your visual brand cues and make friends with some great photographers and designers who can do work for you at competitive rates. Speaking of photographers and designers, next up, think about your partner selection. So your marketing person may need to be a self-starter that can teach themselves how to use Photoshop and InDesign, which are programs that people use to create artwork. But if you can avoid that for high impact work, I'd strongly recommend that you do. It's fine for the occasional social media post and web update hack, but to create the most impactful creative, you'll need some fantastic internal or external creative resources to help you do this. You might need a photographer, a designer, an art director, a copywriter, a creative director. You could hire a big fancy agency to do a campaign concept. You could hire a boutique agency. You could hire a team or find a group of freelance creatives that can collaborate on a project for you. Each of these have pros and cons and should be selected based on your goals and based on your budget. At Square, we are super lucky. We have an incredible internal creative team that collaborate with external partners and production companies for specific projects. So next up, channel selection. What does that even mean? Which owned media, paid media, and earned media will you use to promote your marketing messages? So you've figured out the message that you want to tell with your creative. How are you going to get it out into the world? Well, there is often a sometimes painful chicken and egg scenario when it comes to the development of creative and media plans at scale. In a perfect world, they're developed concurrently to ensure effectiveness. What I can't tell you today is what channels are going to be effective for you or not, because it's going to be super nuanced by brand, by industry, and by audience. But what I can share today is that it's really important to be strategic with how you show up across various channels. For example, when Apple launched, they were known for high impact TV commercials and well-positioned outdoor advertising or billboards. They reinforced their message with continuity with this approach year after year after year, but they made sure they diversified into new channels as the media landscape digitized. So for startups with modest budgets, PR, social media, and referral programs are often very effective and great for starting that flywheel if you've got a compelling value prop and some great creative. Okay, so measurement framework. You're paying a bunch of money to fund a small marketing team, and maybe if you're lucky enough to have decent funding, you've got a marketing budget. How do you measure the impact of this investment? Well, in a large, established, data-led business, you might be lucky enough to have a marketing analytics and data science team that will build an attribution model to assess which investments are driving growth for you. From this, you might be able to see things like cost per acquisition, the lifetime value of your customers, and other profit-based acquisition metrics that are nuanced by company. In addition to brand tracking that can be run by either internal or external insights teams to tell you what your levels of brand awareness and engagement are like. That would be like close to a gold standard. The important thing to remember is to be realistic about your short and long-term goals. As I mentioned earlier, marketing is a marathon, not a sprint. One investment in advertising doesn't necessarily result in one big burst of sales, but what it will do is drive awareness and consideration that can be converted into new prospects in the medium to long term. So when you're setting up your marketing plans, set up your goals up front and be realistic. If you want to be aggressive, set your goals and then set stretch goals to measure against, but make sure you've got alignment with your key stakeholders across the business on what those goals are. This includes your CEO, your CFO, or your finance team. It's very, very important that those who hold the purse strings understand and are aligned to how the marketing work will be valued and measured. For those of you who are in startups or smaller businesses, there are some free low-cost tools and metrics that anyone can access to use to measure the impact of your marketing investments. For example, your web traffic via Google Analytics, your content engagement metrics via Facebook, Instagram, or whichever social media platform you're using. You can look at your brand search queries, so how many people Googled your brand over a period of time via the Google Search Console. And you can also look at click-through rate, conversion rate, completion rate, whatever is relevant within the digital advertising platforms that you're using. So the point is, no matter the size of your business, you can hack together a measurement plan if you need to. Okay, some final words to leave you with as you're considering marketing strategy for your brand. Number one, identify the true role you want marketing to play within your business and get alignment with your executive team on this. That everything is marketing quote that I shared earlier will work its magic when that ethos is top down. That's easier said than done. Number two, let purpose and financial goals drive your marketing strategy. They are the whole reason that we're in business. Never lose sight of that. Number three, set achievable and stretch goals for your team and be realistic about the deliverables relative to the size of your budget and your resources. And then lastly, take some risks, because why work in marketing and do marketing if you can't take some risks and do some innovative things? So with that, I hope this has been helpful for you. It's been fun chatting about this topic. Thanks for your attention so early on a Tuesday morning. And with that, I will kick it back to Amelia to open up the Q&A.
Thanks, Jess. That was golden. There was so much wisdom packed into 20 minutes, I think, of presentation there. Just a heads up, your camera is off if you want to switch that back over. I know we had some issues earlier on. There we go. We've got some questions coming through already, and a reminder that, guys, if you want to send questions through, use the Q&A function on Zoom. But first question, when you talk about everything is marketing and this kind of internal storytelling, how do you actually shift leaders thinking from short-term kind of, campaign or CAC focus to, like, how do you bring them on board with long-term the mission and vision of marketing?
It's a really great question, and it's a really hard thing to do. Founders are not always, they can be very different. Emily Weiss from Glossier seems to be a very marketing-led founder that really understands the value. I think when founders can see other brands doing it, I think that helps. I think it really takes constant iteration, constant storytelling, constant education with your senior level stakeholders to make them see that value. I think there is a lot of cynicism around marketing, whether that be that could come from your founder, that could come from your CFO. Like, we're an expensive department to fund, and that's only natural. But I would say education, iteration, and showing proof points as often as you can. I think that, I don't know, if you were to look at brands like Nike and Apple, they've been doing remarkable advertising over a period of like 30 plus years. And if they hadn't had that constant innovation and that constant work, like, how would they have proved out that was something that worked for them?
Absolutely. Well, you're preaching to the choir here for me anyway, but I think we're getting some great comments coming through as well. That leads into the next question around competition, and how does the marketing team consider, or how do you consider what the competition is doing when you're setting strategy?
Totally. My personal perspective of this is that it's really important to be aware of the competition, but not have them front and center. I would like to kind of say that they're, to be honest, in the rear view mirror. You're aware of what's happening in the market at any given time, but the most important thing is to be focused on your customers and your brands and how you can light them up like a Christmas tree. If you spend too much time focusing on your competitors, then you lose sight of the prize.
Yeah. What about like moving to kind of channels specifics and measurement? Do you have any visibility on average cost per lead for those kind of key, like when we're thinking about B2B versus B2C, or perhaps even if you can't speculate on cost per lead, if there are any specifics when you think about channels for B2B or B2C, or to come back to your point, does it not matter if that, if you see them as being quite synonymous?
Totally. It really depends on your business model and what you're selling. Like, say, for example, you're selling a t-shirt that costs $100 and it costs you $50 to make that t-shirt, then like the cost per lead needs to be relative to the cost of making that product. So if you are, for example, selling business tools and your margin is 30%, then but the lifetime value, it might be thousands of dollars, then your cost per lead could be a couple of $100, and that might make sense. So it really depends on what all of those different metrics are in terms of what an acceptable cost per lead is for your business.
Gotcha. And in terms of like measuring the impact of that content, you mentioned briefly Google Analytics and a couple of other channels for measurement. Is there any kind of tech stack that you would recommend or that you've looked at in the last few years?
Good question. At Square, to be honest, we are so lucky that we have a lot of internally developed tools. To be honest, I probably wouldn't be an expert on what's happening there in the outside world. We're very lucky to have internal teams that have very deep knowledge on all these things.
No, that's fair. For that question, I would add that, look, there are a bunch of great tools, as you mentioned, Jess, in terms of individual insights, for Google, Facebook, Instagram, and also cross-channel metrics that you can check. And then final question, you've given some examples of what big brands have done, but are there any smaller brands or startups that you've seen in the last few years doing interesting things, particularly like maybe it's, you know, bootstrapped marketing or small budgets or even just clever work over the last year in the pandemic? Are there any kind of local or smaller brands, don't have to be in the tech world, that have kind of caught your eye?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been so inspired by what the small business community have done in terms of pivoting their business models to survive and support and stay connected with their customers. I wish I could remember the name of this business, but there is a particular boutique hotel based in Malibu that from what I understand, they completely lost their ability to connect with their customers and have people stay at their beautiful boutique hotel. So they had an incredible restaurant at their hotel. And so what they did was they decided to put all of their internal resources into feeding hospital and health staff. I think the value that that had was, rather than kind of positioning that as marketing, I would say that what they did was it was more about actions than words. And I would say that whilst it may not have been intended to be purpose-led marketing, I think that's a perfect example of purpose-led marketing and doing something which is relatively cost efficient. They kind of repurposed their product and put it in the hands of people that really needed it. And the benefit of that is that it created incredible word of mouth. There was a lot of virality around what they were doing on social media. It created a lot of connections with the community. And I would assume that there was some PR benefits that were picked up off the back of that. So I'd say there are lots of ways that you can do that. There is no playbook. I think it can come down to your product, your audience, and what feels right for the purpose of your brand.
Thanks.
And I will look up the name of that hotel.
Yeah, is it the Surfrider in Malibu?
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
No worries. All right, that's all the time that we've got today. Thank you, Jess, so much for, on behalf of everyone on the call and on Blackbird's behalf, thank you for your presentation and for your advice. And for those on the line, I hope you'll join us next week for a session with Vince Frost and Debbie Spence of Frost Collective for an exploration, I think quite complementary to what we've talked about today, on how you can start up and start right through brand. So thanks, Jess. Thanks, everyone, for joining us, and see you next week.
Thanks for having me. Bye, guys.
Bye.